Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Matt Rhule, the Nebraska Cornhuskers, kicking off their spring game Saturday afternoon. And Dill, not only am I extremely excited about this game because we've talked a ton about this Nebraska program, a lot of new faces, a lot of young talent in this team, but more importantly, this is probably the best spring game atmosphere you'll see across the country year after year after year. I mean, if you want to get a feel for why everyone says this Nebraska fan base, why everyone that knows the sport says that this Nebraska fan base is one of, if not the best fan bases across the country, turn on the spring game Saturday afternoon. It is one of the more electric environments. They sell out the stadium. I'm fired up for this one. A lot of buzz, a lot of juice around this program. Want to get into a few breakout players, few storylines that the boys are going to be following during this game. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys. Massive shout out to the Nebraska fans. Y'all continue to show a ton of love, a ton of support to the fellas. Cannot thank you guys enough. It's been a blast talking this program. The amount of support means the world. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Much more importantly, would love to hear some of your breakout players, your storylines that you're following. We're going to hop right back on Saturday afternoon, break down what we saw on Saturday. And Dill, I'm going to give you the tee box here. Start on the offensive side of the football. Biggest storyline. I have a feeling I know where you're going with this. What do you got for us?
Yeah, it's Dylan Raiola. And I know, obvious answer, but at the end of the day, it is him. This is the guy who, again, if this Nebraska program is going to take off, you certainly hope it's going to be on his shoulders. That's where he wants it to be. And frankly, all I want to see tomorrow is a guy operate the offense really efficiently. It's not about the 5-star throw necessarily, or does he have some really cool highlights. It's, can you play in and play out? Just run the offense correctly, because I thought last year that's essentially what they could not do, is just stay on schedule, make the plays you're supposed to make, and just play clean offense. So that quarterback position just never gave them any real rhythm. That's what I'm looking for from Rhule.
100% agree, and it's super easy to kind of fall for the flash plays, pushing the ball down the field. And hey, look, all the Nebraska fans have seen Dylan Raiola in high school. They know what he's capable of. One of the best arms in all of college football immediately as a true freshman. If he's going to play for Nebraska in 2024, be a true freshman starter, we always talk about this. The arm talent's not going to get in his way. We all know he has that. What would get in his way, you got to show that you can operate this offense, right? Get your protection right, ball out on time quickly where it needs to go, be able to go through your progressions. Dylan Raiola on Saturday afternoon, it's going to be about doing the stuff that's not sexy the right way. We know he can make splash throws. We'll probably see a few of those splash throws on Saturday. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the down and down out stuff. And I think you kind of hammered it right on the head. And I'd say the same thing for a guy like Danny Kaelin, who the Nebraska fans know I love this kid. You talked about being made up of the right stuff at that quarterback spot, didn't flinch as that Dylan Raiola situation played out. This is a guy that wants to be at Nebraska, wants to go through a competition. Not a lot of guys that are made up of that kind of stuff in the modern day of college football. Danny Kaelin is fired up to see him. Now, Dylan, I think the second storyline for this Nebraska program, at least in my opinion, for this passing attack to take that step is the pass catchers. Yes, the quarterback play was not where it needed to be. That is very obvious. I would argue the pass catchers certainly were not either. You go out and get Jamal Banks. You go out and get Isaiah Nayor. Those guys we're very excited about. We'll talk about those guys. But I think what I'm most looking forward to is, Dylan, you had a lot of freshmen who had to play a lot of football when they probably weren't ready in 2023. That's only going to help their progression heading into 2024. The guys like Jalen Lloyd and Malachi Coleman and Doss, what do we see out of those guys going into year two? That's probably what I'm most fired up about.
No, and you're right, because at the end of the day, their quarterbacks were the ones who bore the most of the criticism, and they deserve their share of it too. It was obviously not good enough, but there weren't wide receivers getting open enough and playing good enough from that point of view too. So again, you bring in two really experienced guys, especially Jamal Banks, who's really played great football for Wake Forest for a while. I mean, I do think you're kind of excited to see, can you be open a little bit more? Can you, again, make things look a little easier where the windows don't always need to be razor tight, where it did feel like that last year, just with guys not getting off of press coverage, not beating man, not settling in zones where they were supposed to. And again, you have two new experienced wide receivers. You want to see those young guys step up. And frankly, if they do a good job against the Nebraska secondary, you'll feel pretty good. Like there's some games that are like, oh, if you're beating the LSU secondary in LSU spring game, it's like, well, what does that mean? Like everyone is beating them. But if you beat Nebraska secondary and you see easier throws, guys who are open, I think you'll be very encouraged. Like, okay, we might have something in the wide receiver room we didn't have last year where, again, they did not make it easy on those.
You guys need guys making plays for your quarterback, especially if you are going to start a true freshman at quarterback. You need guys that are going to make the plays. I think another storyline, again, there's so many reasons, and I get it's the Kool-Aid every single year. Like, call it as it is. Like, there are a lot of reasons to be excited about this Nebraska team heading into 2024. Quarterback play, upgrade at wide receivers. Dill, this offensive line is another storyline that I don't think a lot of people have a lot of respect for heading into 2024. This Nebraska offensive line, for lack of better terms, when they came out against Minnesota, they stunk. Like, it was ugly from not only just missing blocks, but like poor assignments, guys running free. You fast forward to week 12, that offensive line made massive improvements. And Matt Rhule, what is the number one thing we were most excited for him when he took the job? Player development. And you saw this offensive line within the span of 3 months take massive steps. What does it look like with a full offseason under their belt heading into 2024? I think you might have a massively improved offensive line as well.
And to me, you feel pretty good about your starting five. And you got Prohaska, who I thought made big steps at left tackle last year. Evans Jenkins, if you've been listening to us, you know we're excited about. And then you bring in Mazakua to kind of, again, replace what you're losing a little bit in the inside. And a guy who's really proven at Baylor and Florida. I'm kind of looking for some of the young guys too, not necessarily to start this year, but frankly, because like, is the blueprint there? Are you seeing your younger guys play really good? Is Gatula going to play good? Is Sledge going to play good? Knutson, some of those guys who came in Matt Rhule's earlier classes, like, are they going to look the part? Are they going to make their strides and develop the way that you just didn't see guys develop under Scott Frost, where year after year, you'd be like, oh, there's a lot of potential in this offensive line, and it'd be bad again. And then you say it again next year.
And from a depth standpoint, like I think also, like, you trying to win games in the Big Ten, trying to win games in November, which was a problem for Nebraska, you got to be deep on that offensive line. And I think they showed some depth last year. That's the question that we have heading into 2024 is, hey, do we have 8-9 guys? Do we feel good about trotting out there heading into 2024? The guy in the running back room that I'm most excited for, Dante Dowdle. Like, I think that Nebraska, when Gabe Irvin went down and Anthony Grant struggled holding on to the football, not a shot at my guy Emmett Johnson, great football player. They didn't have the bruiser, right? Can Dante Dowdle come in and kind of give that physicality look to this Nebraska run game? That's how they want to operate. Like, they want to operate downhill, be physical, take on contact. They just didn't really have the running back that was designed for that. Dante Dowdle could be that guy. I cannot wait to see what he looks like behind that Nebraska offensive line now.
And I think there's an element of you want to maybe see a bit more explosion too. And Dowdle probably gives you a little more than, like, say, Gabe Irvin might, where again, you open up some creases. Can you hit some big plays? Because that's another issue. I thought, like, Nebraska did run the ball okay at times for sure, but you didn't have a ton of big plays. I do think it'd be interesting to see if Dowdle can give you just a little bit of an extra gear in terms of hitting big plays, because we've always talked about it. If you want to be a good explosive offense, you got to have some of those 30-plus yarders.
You know, if you want some explosive plays in the run game, Dylan Edwards just hit the transfer portal. I would kick the tires on that guy too. I mean, that is as explosive as it gets from that running back spot. Defense. I think this unit's going to be elite. I think you had a Nebraska defense that was one of the best units in the country last year. They pretty much return all of their production heading into 2024. Dill, it's year 2 of a complicated defense. That's when you see the jumps. You saw it with Ohio State with Jim Knowles. You saw it with Michigan with their defensive coordinators. Can they make that jump year 2 and go from a really good defense to a great defense? Now, I would start with, I want to see turnovers forced. I don't know if I necessarily want to see that, because the turnovers are coming from the Nebraska offense. Let's start with the defensive line. Ty Nash on the inside. I like this defensive line. The question that I have that kind of similar to the offensive line is, what's your depth look like on the defensive line? Do you have some of those young guys like your Riley Van Poppel step up and say, yeah, I can be a very reliable piece on this defensive line heading into 2024?
And that's really the only question I think I have, is that depth in the interior. And do guys like Riley Van Poppel, Cameron Leonard take some steps? And again, those two just probably like did they get kind of college level strong? I think they both came in and they weren't like the highest of high recruits. So maybe not like day one guys, but very much thrust into the action, just given where Nebraska was at as a program and played pretty good football. But I think you want to see like, okay, did this weight room, did just getting another year, are they physically a little bit more explosive, a little bit stronger? Just because, again, I thought they both played good football, but there's probably another athletic gear I think you want to
can
get
tell
to.
Riley Van Poppel just was a little undersized for like playing that nose at times. So he ain't no Nash or Ty on the inside of that defensive line. Needs a couple of years. Though Cam Leonard, like what I'm most excited about, Cam Leonard came in, played really good football. How about Prince Will U, I should say. Sorry, get him confused with his brother sometimes. He was a cat that I thought would need a redshirt year. Like I did not think he'd play much for Nebraska as a true freshman. Surprised me. And not only played for Nebraska, played at a high level. He's a guy that we always knew he'd hit his stride year 2, year 3. How much better does he get from his freshman year? And if he makes a big step, you are looking at one of the more dangerous edge rushers that you see in the country. Now, moving back to the linebacker room, this is probably the position group I have the most question marks for on this Nebraska team. I like some of the guys, Wright, Bullock. What I'm most excited for is how are we getting Stephon Thompson involved, a guy that uber productive, and I know had some growing pains during spring practice and not in shape, kind of getting back with that Nebraska culture. What does Stephon Thompson look like, and how is he getting utilized in this Tony White defense? Because Tony White knows better than anybody how to get Stephon Thompson involved in this defense.
And that is kind of a good point because I thought like even last year you saw them kind of work guys out at different spots until they sort of settled. And Javen Wright was playing up a little bit more on the line, I should say, at that almost defensive end outside linebacker role until he kind of settled in at that off-ball linebacker where I thought he really thrived. So I think, again, you look at a guy like Javen Wright, MJ Sherman, Stephon Thompson, some of those guys where, again, I don't think their roles were totally clearly defined last year, but as they've grown in the system. And Stephon Thompson, you obviously go back, he's very familiar with Tony White. Tony White's no doubt very familiar with him. So do you kind of hit the ground running a little bit faster with having guys in more defined roles where, again, you know where they're best at? Because I do think there was a bit of like playing around with that, it felt like last year.
And if there's one reason to be massively excited about this Nebraska defense going into this year, it's what you just said. You're totally right. They were playing around with a lot of different. I remember Principal you talking about playing multiple different positions, off-ball linebacker at times, where it's like these guys were. You had a new defense coordinator, a lot of new players on the roster. You're trying to figure out where guys excel, and then that when they have to go and find their place, they got to figure out, okay, all my responsibilities that I have. You're going to see a unit that's a little bit more confident in terms of what they need to do, what their responsibilities are. That's when we saw Mike McDonald take that defense with Michigan to the next level. Not the players didn't change. Their confidence in the system did. And that's kind of where you see them take that step. And I think if you're a Nebraska fan, year 2 into a very complicated defense. Like Tony White did not come in here and play just base coverage. All right, we're going to play man, same coverage every time. A lot of different looks, a lot of different packages, a lot of different responsibilities. Year 2 in that system could mean massive things for a lot of these players.
And not only complex, but very different. I mean, you just see how different it was from last year, 2022, I should say, to 2023 when Tony White took over. It just like, again, they were playing a very vanilla. It felt like base 4-2, 4-3 kind of look. Last year, you just saw multiple packages, multiple personnel, multiple fronts. Everything was just different. And you're right. When you need to like learn all that in 1 year, it does. You've noticed like Brent Venables getting better at Oklahoma, Michigan's defensive coordinators from the Ravens tree, all those defenses their first year, they've all made big jumps. So I'd expect nothing less, especially because this is a very well-coached unit or a very well-coached team. They have a very good staff compared to probably what they've had in the past.
It's a great staff. The secondary, I've listened to some Nebraska podcasts that say they have questions about this unit. I think it is elite unit. I think you got competition. I think you got high-end NFL caliber guys. I am very high on this Nebraska secondary. I don't have many questions, Dill. I guess we'll finish this one out on breakout players. You can go offense, defense. I would love to hear from you guys in the comment section. Who's your breakout player that we're going to be talking about Saturday afternoon as that guy in 2024?
I think Javen Wright. I thought he came on last year. I think he's going to come into a day 2 minimum NFL line.
Ooh.
He's got the right kind of frame, athleticism, all those things you look for to be that long, that athletic, play box, but or sideline to sideline, I should say, and play tough in the box, along with the ability to rush the passer when called upon. I just think when you talk about versatile linebackers, I thought once they stuck him in that middle linebacker, off-ball linebacker role, he really thrived. I think he is going to dominate this game. I think he's going to look really good. I think he's going to be their guy on defense.
I'm going to go with the transfer Hill, coming from the FCS rank. And the Nebraska fans, you know my kind of linebacker. Long, rangy. He needs to put on some weight. Very good
That's
athlete.
a tough room to crack, though.
Ton of length. I think Hill is going to be a guy that is extremely difficult to keep off the field in 20. And it's a good problem to have. You want to have depth in that back end. I love what Hill is made up of. I can't wait to see him on Saturday, get a sense of what does that transition look like from the FCS to Big Ten football. Fired up for this one again. We'll hop on right after the game, talk about what we saw. Appreciate the Nebraska fans rocking with the boys. Would love to hear from y'all in the comment section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.